Hello, welcome back to From the Bookshelf for another book club episode. We are once again looking at Vampire Academy by Rochelle Mead. Today we will be looking at chapters 12 through 15. Before we get started, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. That way you can get notified for any new episodes we have for the book club series, as well as my weekly downloads on Saturday and anything new we have going on the channel. All right, we are going to start on chapter 12 on page 160. So in this scene, we have the dorm matron, the teacher who looks over the kids in the dorms, getting all upset because somebody appears to be breaking in to the dorms and killing animals and leaving them around for Alyssa to find. She says, "No one should be able to get into those rooms," exclaimed the matron. "How is this happening?" And I don't know why, but I find this comment funny. I feel like that's an easy thing to answer. It's obviously someone in campus, probably someone who lives in the dorms. Like, even if I hadn't read this book before, it's like you're constantly finding boys in the girls' dorms and girls in the boys' dorms. You know, it's quite easy for them to get in. So why is it so difficult for this person to come in just because they're doing something bad? Because it's something bad that they're doing, that means it's harder for them to be able to get into the dorms? I don't know. That just seems like a funny question. There's not really an issue. I just think she's like stressed out and thinking, how can this possibly be happening? But it's like, I don't know. It seems like obvious, right? Somebody's coming into the dorms who's there on campus, and really they're only stopping from people coming from outside the school getting in, not other kids or teachers or, you know, staff, that kind of thing. So it's clearly somebody there on campus doing it, and that's just kind of obvious to me. So let's move over to page 161. So in this, it's the headmistress once again being completely over the top ridiculous. Rose is saying something probably sarcastic and just annoys the headmistress anytime she opens her mouth. It doesn't matter what she says. But Kurova notices that Rose is there, and she says, "Miss Hathaway," declared Kurova, "you're out of line as usual. I don't even know what you're doing here." Well, seeing as how Rose is literally the only reason you know something's going on, like, you wouldn't even be there. Nobody would even know that Alyssa was in trouble and that this animal had been found dead in the dorms if it weren't for Rose. Like, Rose is there because she's the one who helped you find what's going on. She's the reason you know Alyssa's in trouble. I feel like she just finds reasons to be upset, and that's all. She just wants to be mad at Rose. It doesn't matter what Rose says or what Rose does. She could be, you know, literally putting out a fire, and Headmistress Kurova would be telling her, "We don't need your help. Go away." But that's just me. Let's go to page 167. So, in this section, we see that the other kids at the school have found out that while Rose and Alyssa were on the run, hiding from the school on their own, that Rose was giving blood to Alyssa so that she could survive, and it's spreading like a dirty rumor because, you know, of course, in their society, it's a dirty thing. So her and Rose are trying to figure out what's going on, how they found out, and this is what Rose says. She says, "How do you think? Your friend Christian?" "No," she said adamantly, "he wouldn't have. Who else knew?" So Rose is getting mad. She's saying, "Obviously it was because you told Christian what happened. That's why everybody knows. He opened his mouth and told people." But it's like, Rose, do we forget what happened with you and Jesse? And the fact that Jesse knew? Jesse figured it out? So just because Dimitri showed up and threatened him and that's the only reason you don't suspect him. Like, you don't suspect him at all. The guy's a total sleaze, right? He came on to her and tried to force her into doing something she didn't want to do. And who knows what might have happened if Dimitri hadn't shown up and literally thrown him across the room. So it's like, Christian's not the only option. But in Rose's mind, he's the only logical option. He's the only option that could be real. Could be something that would happen because, you know, it can't be Rose's fault. It has to be someone else's fault. Rose couldn't have done anything to cause the situation. But we'll see that, spoiler alert, it wasn't Christian who did anything. Christian's the good guy. He's just being unfairly judged. Let's move to page 171. So Rose is kind of getting into it with the Moroi boys, who are being complete a-holes to her after finding out about the whole blood thing. And she's like, okay, I'm gonna kick their asses and that'll be the end of that. And she thinks, but asshole or not, he was right. If I touched him, Kurova would expel me in the blink of an eye. And if I got kicked out, Lissa would be alone. Taking a deep breath, I made one of the hardest decisions of my life. I walked away. And of course, to teenagers, just real quick before I get into my point, to teenagers, walking away and not confronting something automatically means you're admitting they're right. I have this problem with somebody I know very well who, if I don't try to argue my point and fight back, if I just, you know, agree and move on, he thinks he's right. But really, I just want to stop arguing about it, and I don't think he's right. In fact, I know he's not right, but you can't argue with him at that point because it'll never end. And that's how teenagers think, right? You know, oh, she walked away, she didn't fight it out. That means we're right, she's wrong, and, you know, we're going to look down on her for it. But here's this thing here where these kids are spreading horribly vicious rumors about Rose, lies even, about her doing more with Jesse than she did, and all of that. And the fact that Rose feels like her only options are to literally fight back and get expelled or do nothing is just, it's sad to see, because a lot of people think that they can't fight back because they'll get in trouble, and if they try to tell someone, no one will listen, nobody will do anything. And that's kind of how Rose feels in this situation. She feels like if she tries to go to somebody and tell them about the situation, it's going to make matters worse. It's not going to fix anything. She's just going to end up getting bullied more. They're going to tell her, well, just deal with it, you know. And it almost seems like the teachers at the school and the headmistress don't really care about their students so much, unless they're like, you know, the royal kids. And they let things happen that they shouldn't, especially when it comes to Kurova. She's just a biatch in a lot of ways. Let's move on to page 173. Rose and Lissa are talking about the lies that are going around, and Mia kind of like ruining Rose's reputation. And Rose says she already did. She said she'd get back at me, that I wouldn't be able to protect you. She did it. When I go back to classes, a sickening feeling settled in my stomach. I thought about the friends and respect I'd managed to eke out despite our low profile. That would be gone. You couldn't come back from something like this. Not among the Moroi. Once a blood whore, always a blood whore. What made it worse was that some dark secret part of me liked being bitten. You shouldn't have to keep protecting me. I laughed. That's my job. I'm going to be your guardian. So, is this idea that, right, as we get to the end of it, that guardians protect their Moroi. They protect them, keep them safe, keep them alive. And so Rose does. And she's taking this abuse and these lies because she wants to protect Lissa. She doesn't want to, you know, make it into something it isn't me. She's going to just get through it and be treated horribly and be bullied and all of that simply because of lies somebody is telling. Even though it's not completely the truth. But then if you look at it at this aspect, they're supposed to protect, right? So if while they were out there on the run and Rose hadn't given Lissa blood, wouldn't Lissa have died? Wouldn't she not have been able to survive? So there's this idea, but by giving Lissa blood, she was protecting her. She was keeping her alive, keeping her safe. If she hadn't done that and she died, then she'd be doing the opposite of her job. So we're going to act like it's some horrible thing that she did it, but she only did it to keep her alive, to keep her safe, to protect her. So, I mean, so what does it come down to? Like, either you protect your Moroi and do whatever you have to keep them safe and alive, or you get people to like you and respect you. Like, if liking and being liked and respected means letting your friends and those you're supposed to be protecting die, then what's the point? I think that society in the school has a very narrow mind about this aspect, that they can't see past it so much that they're ignoring the facts of the situation. Let's go to page 180. All right, so we are going to move on to chapter 13, and we're going to go to page 180. So Lissa and Christian kind of had a run-in. So after Rose's talk to Christian, he thinks Lissa doesn't like him and she wants him to leave her alone. So they like blow up, and he confronts her about the compulsion she uses on the Moroi, and they have this huge fight, and he calls her names and he's mean. Like, this is the first time we see him kind of act like a dick, like a jerk, like big time. And Rose says, returning to myself, I stared blankly around the classroom, processing what I'd seen. Some tiny, tiny part of me was starting to feel sorry for Christian. It was only a tiny part, though, and very easy to ignore. So, ignore the ignore part. But if we go to the part where she feels sorry for him now, but she only feels sorry for him while he's acting like a jerk. Like, he's acting like this nice, sweet guy who cares about Lissa, and she doesn't feel sorry for him. She just judges him and basically ruins this relationship that Lissa started with him. But now that he's being an a-hole to Lissa, she's like, oh, I kind of feel bad for him now. I don't know why, but it's just so funny to think that how Rose's mind works is she feels bad now that he's being like a jerk. Oh, but he was being nice before, but I was judging him before, and I don't know. I think Rose will eventually realize the kind of guy Christian is, but for now, it's just funny to see that, like, how Rose kind of looks at the world. It's not really in line with, like, reality. Let's move on to page 183. So, in this scene, Dimitri and Rose are talking about Dimitri and his family and how he grew up in one of the Dampier communities where women basically raised their kids and didn't become guardians. You know, the women that are all looked down upon. I know, silly. But, he grew up in one of these communities and has this great life with his mother and his sisters. And, you know, his Moroi father's kind of an a-hole. But we won't talk about that right now. So Rose is here thinking, my bitterness returned, and I glanced down to hide my glare. Dimitri had had a happier family life with his disgraced mother and relatives than I'd had with my respective guardian mother. He most certainly knew his mother better than I knew mine. So Rose's mother didn't really raise her. She, like, dumped her into boarding school as soon as she could. So we see this idea that Rose has that because her mother is this respected, legendary guardian, that means she should have automatically had a happier life and things should have been better. And here Dimitri is with a disgraced mother who lives in a commune, who raised your kids and didn't become a guardian, and he was happy. And somehow she thinks, well, that shouldn't be right. I should have had, you know, a better life because my mother is all respected and loved by, like, everyone in our community. But I don't think your worth has anything to do with your job and the career you have. I think it has to do with who you are as a person. And just because Dimitri's mother wanted to raise her children and not fight and be a guardian, that doesn't mean that she can't love her children and give them a happy home. Honestly, I think it's the other way around. A guardian who's more focused on their career is going to be neglectful of their child, because as we see with Rose, her mother's too busy protecting them from Roy and fighting for them to be there for Rose. Like, Rose hardly ever sees her. They don't have a good relationship for quite a long time. Her mother does make an appearance in the second book, and when we get to that, we'll talk a bit about their relationship. It's like the rockiest thing there is, but I don't see why Rose has to say one means you can't have the other. So let's go to page 185. So here we are talking about Dimitri's dad. Now, I know I said we wouldn't talk about that, but now we are. So he's talking about how his dad is Royal Moroi father, always came to visit his mother, and he wasn't a nice guy. Right, used to smack his mother around, and he didn't approve of that. So he says when he was 13, he beat up his dad, and he didn't come back. It wasn't that hard. I was stronger than he was, almost as tall. I couldn't let him keep doing that. He had to learn that being royal and Moroi doesn't mean you can do anything you want to other people, even blood whores. I stared. I couldn't believe he just said that about his mother. I don't know. I felt like... Oh, wait. Let me keep reading. He says, it's all right. Pieces clicked into place for me. That's why you got so upset with Jesse, isn't it? He was another royal trying to take advantage of a Dampier girl. I got upset over that for a lot of reasons. After all, you were breaking the rules. Okay, never mind. We don't really need any of that. So basically, he kind of gives this, like, well, he brings up the whole blood whore thing, and it's like, is that really necessary? I feel like he's just kind of making an unnecessary jab at Rose over all the rumors that are flying around. I feel like he knows that what Jesse's spreading around school isn't true, and he doesn't believe it, but here he is kind of poking her with this. Like, I don't know, it just seems unnecessary. Like, why do we need to even mention it? I don't know. It just seems kind of mean on his part. Like, I get it. You're trying to make a point, but Rose doesn't need the point. Rose doesn't need the point to be made so much that you kind of make her feel like crap. Yeah, Jesse, another Moroi boy, Royal Moroi, was like trying to take advantage of her. Is that the whole situation? But I don't know. Just seemed like a little unnecessary thing to add. Let's go to page 189. All right, so we are now on chapter 14, and we're going to go to page 189. So basically, this is what Natalie's rambling about. Natalie is just kind of like going off because it's what she does. They sure seem to like you a lot now, the other royals. Is who she's talking about. I mean, not that anyone wouldn't like you, but once you came back and didn't talk to them, they seemed okay ignoring you too. I heard them talking about you a lot. I guess it's not surprising, because they're Mia's friends too. But isn't it weird how much they like you now? Like, I hear them always waiting to see what you want to do before they make plans and stuff. And a bunch of them are defending Rose now, which is really crazy. Not that I believe any of that stuff about her, but I never would have thought it was possible. I don't think I don't think Lissa really needs compulsion all that much to get people to like her. She's pretty likable on her own. Like, she got them to like her without using compulsion previously. So, I don't see why it's so weird. As for the Rose part, she probably would need to use compulsion for that, specifically because of the whole stigma because of the whole stigma with the whole Dampiers and giving blood and stuff like that. But Lissa's pretty likable. I don't see her really needing compulsion just to get other kids to like her. Like, I feel like she can just do that on her own. Let's go on to page 193. So here we have another Dampier who, hearing the rumors about Rose, is coming on to her, and she's basically telling him to F off, leave her alone. And he's like, well, no, give it to, like, you know, they get what they want. I want some of that too. And Mason comes to her defense because he's Mason, he's her best friend, and he's a little bit in love with her. So he jumps in and tries to defend her, and things just go crazy. So speaking of Miles, who is the other Dampier who's being an a-hole, he was bigger of the two and left me to go square off with Mason. So he goes to fight Mason. Anthony backed off from me, more interested in whether or not there'd be a fight. There was so much testosterone in the air. I felt I needed a gas mask too. I need to get, there's no two. So basically we're about to have a fight. A few Dampier boys are basically harassing Rose, and now they're about to get into a fight. And my thoughts are there no adults in this school? Like, do the adults only exist in classrooms or in the dorms when needed? Like, do they not exist outside roaming around? Because there never seems to be an adult around when they need one, or Dimitri for that matter. He always seems to be lurking somewhere, but never in a situation where he needs to step in. Like, it's ridiculous the way these kids are acting, and nobody seems to care. None of the teachers, none of the adults seem to care about the harassment, the attacks, the physical violence, and all of that that's going on in their school at all. And it's just crazy that there's never an adult around when it seems like there needs to be an adult around. So let's go to page 198. So in this part, Rose is reading about Vladimir. And here we go. Reading on, I found out that it was a good thing old Vlad had Anna around, because he was pretty messed up. The more he used his powers, the more they started to get to him. He'd get irrationally angry and sad. He blamed it on demons and stupid stuff like that, but it was obvious he suffered from depression. Once he admitted in his diary he tried to kill himself. Anna stopped him. Who does that sound like? Who gets mood swings and gets sad and depressed and upset and angry and all of these things? Do you guess? Lissa? Just another connection between her and Vladimir, and basically the soul, the spirit, not soul, it's the same thing, but the spirit that she uses in her magic. So we're going to go to the next page on 199. This is the same thing. We're once again talking about Vladimir and Anna. And many think it miraculous too. The power the blessed Vladimir shows over others. Maroy and Dampiers flock to him and listen to his words, happy just to hear him. Some say it is madness that touches him and not spirit. But most adore him and would do anything he asked. Such is the way God marks his favorites. And it is such moments, and followed by hallucinations and despair. It is a small sacrifice for the amount of good and leadership he can show among the people. And I wonder, as Rose is reading this, how she doesn't draw the parallels between Vladimir and Lissa and like Anna and herself. And it's just, she must be super dense at times to not see that this is like, exactly like Lissa. Like, Lissa gets the same way. She gets people to do what she wants. They love her. Compulsion, anyone? Like, Rose even knows that she's using compulsion like this, and yet she doesn't draw the line between it. She doesn't see that that's what that is. All right, so let's go to page 200. So Miss Carp, who was a teacher at school before they left, is talking to Rose after seeing Lissa bring the dead bird back to life. You have to leave. You're bound. It's up to you. Take her away from this place. Her words were crazy. No one left the academy, yet as she held me there and stared into my eyes, I began to feel strange. A fuzzy feeling clouded my mind. She said, What she suddenly, what she, what she said suddenly sounded very reasonable, like the most reasonable thing in the world. Yes, I needed to take Lissa away. Take her. So does she not see that this is like literally, as she's remembering it, like she's remembering this happening. It's not like it's happening at the moment. She's remembering that this happened. It's like, does she not see the compulsion in it? Like she goes from thinking people don't leave the academy to being, oh, that's actually a great idea. I should take Lissa and we should leave. So looking back on it, I wonder how she doesn't realize that she was told to leave because of compulsion. It wasn't her choice, which is why it pisses me off when Kurova doesn't listen to her, because she didn't have a choice in the matter. She left because someone used compulsion on her, not because it was actually her choice. Like, it wasn't her choice. But yeah. And we're going to go to page 203. So Lissa's at a party with the royals, and she's got Rose there. And Rose says, I glanced down at my cup, half surprised to see it full. I don't know. I guess I don't think guardians should drink around their charges. She's not your charge yet. You're one on duty. You won't be for a long time. Since when did you get so responsible? Yes, responsible Rose. I think Rose has her moments. She's definitely a lot more responsible than people give her credit for. They think because she took Lissa and left the academy that makes her irresponsible. But understanding, as we just saw, that it was compulsion that made her leave and not her choice, I think we see that she was responsible in the way she took care of Lissa. She kept her alive for 2 years out there when it wasn't her choice to go and take her. But we see that she was responsible in that sense. And here she is being even more responsible. She's not drinking. She's trying to help Lissa in the best way she can, which is to not drink and to just be there to help her when she needs it. All right, so we're going to move to page 206. And Rose is remembering an incident that happened shortly before they ran away. Some of the Moroi boys got a feeder who was probably only like Rose's age. She was maybe 16. A minor, in a sense, right? I followed his gaze to where Wade Voda stood with his arm around a frail girl about my age. She was human and pretty, with wavy blonde hair and porcelain skin, pale from so much blood loss. A few other guys had homed on her and stood with Wade, laughing and touching her face and hair. She's already fed too much today, I said, observing her coloring in complete look of confusion. Greg slid his hand around my neck and turned me back to him. They won't hurt her. Well, if she's already like so pale from blood loss, even if you're just feeding on her, you are hurting her. But my thought here is, what's the line that we draw on consent? I mean, we know that the vampire bite is like a drug. They become addicted. She's a minor. Like, I feel like that should be taken into account too. There's this girl who's like 15. And she's basically living at the academy. I don't know exactly how the feeders work in that sense, but do her parents not notice that she's missing, that she's gone? Basically, she was like turned into a drug addict and then abducted. Like, these boys don't really have her consent. She's so like high from the vampire bite that she can't consent at all, period. So I mean, where do we draw that line? Where do we draw that line for teenage boys who don't really care? And where are the adults to make sure that these teenage boys don't get out of hand with an underage teenage girl? Here, once again, there's no adults around when you need them. Let's move to page 208. So Rose is getting upset that they have this feeder and they won't let her go. And he says he's going to take her to his dorm room so they don't have to watch. And he says, he grabbed the feeder's girl's arm and jerked her away. Clumsily, she stumbled along with him out of the room, making soft whimpering noises. So the word whimpering doesn't really strike me as a word that somebody would use for someone who's willing and who wants to be going along with this. It honestly sounds like someone who doesn't want to be there and is doing something they don't want to do, and they're afraid and they're scared. So it sounds like she doesn't want to be there, doesn't want to be doing this, but everyone's ignoring it because, well, she's a feeder. She's basically a less than human, is almost what it feels like. So let's go to page 210. So Melissa is using compulsion to make Wade basically wreck his room to pay him back for what he's done to this girl. And Lissa's face stayed impassive. Inside her, I could feel the battle she was waging for control. Some part of her didn't want to hurt Wade, despite the blinding anger that otherwise filled her. Her face crumpled and she squeezed her eyes shut. Her right hand clenched out to her left wrist and clenched it, nails digging deep into her flesh. So the pain distracted her. So she's basically like waging a war in her mind. Is she like literally gone crazy? Has the using the compulsion and making him destroy his room? Like, he had a bat and he's basically destroying his entire room because of the compulsion. It's like, has she actually lost her mind? Because that's kind of how it feels, right? In that sense. So she's waging this war, rage, hate, anger, and it's like by using her magic and her powers, she's making it possible for herself to control herself and her actions. And I think we see that more as the books go on. So we're going to go once over to the next page, on to 11. So basically, the teachers show up, finally, right? The teachers show up now in this moment, right? And Wade, who just destroyed his room because of compulsion, doesn't remember any of it, has the bat in his hand. And he's like, I doesn't remember. So he's like, what happened? And he's like, oh, it must have been Rose. Says, I don't know, I can't. And his attention he turned his full attention to me and suddenly grew angry. What? That was you. You wouldn't let the feeder thing go. The dorm workers looked at me questioningly, and in a few seconds, I made up my mind. So my whole thing with this is he doesn't remember doing it, but he's got the bat in his hand. How would Rose make him destroy the thing? Destroy his room? Can't they just ask the girl what she saw? She saw him destroy his, like, they don't understand compulsion or how it works. Like, I guess this makes sense, but so basically these adults, you see Wade with a bat in his hand and he puts the blame on Rose. He's got the bat in his hands. Why do we automatically blame Rose? Like, I know she's protecting Lissa and all that, but I mean, if you walk in with somebody having been shot on the floor, are you going to blame the person who says they did it or the person with the gun in his hand and the blood on him? I don't know. It just seems crazy that these adults would automatically believe it was Rose simply because a teenage boy says it must have been. But whatever, right? So that's it for today. And it was a bit longer of an episode. I'm going to, in the future, after this book, to try and shorten the videos down a little bit just so they're not quite as long. So we'll see that going in. However, this one's already been scripted, so we'll get the next 2 episodes for this book. We're almost done with it. So go ahead and comment down below. Let me know what you thought, what you agreed with, didn't agree with, anything I missed. If you have any recommendations for books I should do in the future, go ahead and let me know. And until next time.